Hi there, my name's Steve Scannell. Welcome to the Scannell Agenda. Today's date is January 12th, and this is show number 74, Beware Privatization. Beware privatization, and that means of government services. Okay, so this is show number 4, January 12th, 2018. We're having a bit of a problem that is, and I did see a professor talking about this, and I want to get her book. She was on C-SPAN. I have her name written down somewhere. I'm going to read that book about anti-privatization. But I can tell you from my experience that what we need dearly is local systems with social services and not big private schemes with privatized agencies that run clubhouses. Now, I know Duffy asked them to look into bidding for the Bay Bridge Clubhouse a number of years ago. And that bidding process was so corrupt that all the old players and the let's say the contracts had run out like 7 or 8 years or 10 years beyond, and they were running without contracts, all these agencies that ran the clubhouses. And at that time, for us, it was the May Institute. Before the May Institute was Fellowship Health Resources. And then, let's say, after the May Institute at Bay Bridge, where I took my poisoning there on May a few years ago, when they were changing of the guard between the May Institute and the VinFin, the new agency that came in. I guess the May got ushered out because of their crimes. Now, the problem is really that if you have a psych system whereby you have people vying for money, the way, let's say, the May Institute was responsible for my original diagnoses, which was delusions of grandeur. And as I mentioned, I was running for president at age 6. And I mentioned I was also running for Pope, but that wasn't until I was like probably 8 or 10. But I wasn't really running for Pope. I was just thinking about, you know, if I were good in the church and I did a good job and I rose up the ranks and I were a priest and I could probably have a shot at being really good like a bishop or a cardinal. And I was a little kid, okay? And then I got wind of the girls, and I got wind of the fact that a lot of the priests were, you know, celibate, gay, or whatever. And so I shifted gears at that point once I learned about that. And I had some experiences too that were touch on that. But privatization with a clubhouse is totally counterproductive, because you want your local people involved with these clubhouses, and you want to broaden out your scope too in the clubhouses. You want to include your ex-military personnel, and you want to hire them, and you want them on staff, and you want them as a staff assistant, and you want them as great clubhouse members, and you want these ex-military guys running the job and bunk or being present in some of these camps that I mentioned earlier, you know, like a Bohemian camp or an Americana camp, as I call it, and then a Christian camps. If we're going to have the anti-vagrancy be successful, we have to have a place for everybody, not a little box for everybody. I'm not saying that. But the privatization of all of these pseudo-government institutions like the clubhouse is very bad. There's a lot of money being skimmed. In other words, there's a lot of money that goes to this part of the budget and that part of the budget, and actually it's pocketed and not, you know, over budgeting on. Oh, there's just a lot of fraud, and it's been like that for years. I belong to the Cove Clubhouse, very nice little clubhouse. But these agencies can't resist making the extra money because they're allowed to, and there's no oversight. I remember some representatives came in, and I said to one of the guys that was a representative, I said, you know, this is very corrupt here, this whole thing. He didn't want to hear it. And I've told some of them over the years about the corruption. They don't want to hear it. Don't want to hear about it. Now, if I told you, the citizens, you might want to hear it, and you might want to hear about the reforms. Well, if we wanted to go freestanding with the deed, which is my recommendation for all these clubhouses, that means you could set up a clubhouse as a deeded property, and that would be a 501c3, a nonprofit. And then you'd have a board of governors with a psychiatrist on board. I think that's a legal requirement for a board of governors that oversees one of these agencies. But bearing in mind, again, that a clubhouse is not a clinical location. We don't have nurses dispensing pills. We have low-paid staff. And some of the turnover can be pretty high because if you're entering into social services and you want to do a good job, you might not necessarily want to do a good job ripping off the public for the agencies. That might give you a bad taste for your job. But if your job was just to help the mentally ill and mentally retarded or cognitively impaired, nowadays that's the buzzword there, and then, or, you know, people that are disabled in one way or another. Now, I had a list of 5 disabilities. I had mentally ill, mentally retarded, I called it, because cognitive is kind of it's not a word I use, cognitively slow, whatever. And then physically disabled. And of course, you can have mixes of all 3 and more. But then I add spiritually disabled. Now, if you've killed a lot of people and you're a military man, you might have a spiritual disability, and they call that quite often PTSD, but it can be easily defined also as a spiritual disability. And then the last one I call down on your luck, as a legitimate disability that we could give you, let's just say, as a practical matter. You want to be practical. Poor Donald Trump, he said something wrong, and he's getting beat up pretty badly again. Said something about Haiti, and they're using the word S-hole, which I think is absurd. All right, but now we had a person in the clubhouse who was severely disabled by virtue of the fact that they were very, very racist. And they came into the club and they left the club cured. With the love at the clubhouse, between the staff and all the members working on you, whatever your problem is, you don't even know or define what your problem is. You're going to get work done because of the cooperation in a clubhouse. So these are the ticket as far as all these disabilities go. Now, I would say, too, that you can also, you can do double duty with some institutions that we have now, such as the unemployment office could be combined with a clubhouse. And this place here, which is the Cape Cod Community Media Center, could be combined with a clubhouse and a unemployment office and media center. So you would have multi-talented staff that could do a lot of different things. And we always called ourselves at Bay Bridge Clubhouse a disability employment service. In other words, we always considered ourselves to be a pretty big employment agency for the disabled, and that is true. And that's the big cornerstone of any clubhouse, is to work in the clubhouse, to get confidence that way, and then to go out and get a job, you know. So if Donald Trump is listening, these clubhouses are the ticket, but not the way they're structured now with all this privatization. What we need to do is have freestanding with the deed. Now, what happens with a really good, top-notch clubhouse is that you have an effect of, first of all, your clubhouse with the deed, and then you start adding on housing. You know, you might say, oh boy, another housing authority. No, people with mental illness, you may find you want to live in protected environments with other people that do have mental illness or other problems. Because frankly, a lot of the people in a clubhouse are not truly mentally ill. They've had problems, and they've been diagnosed because they have problems and they need care. And with my system of diagnoses, you'll be able to pull that off without lying through your teeth if you're a doctor, you know, to say someone is mentally ill and it's not true, you know, but you're signing off because, you know, you want to get them some help. Well, you'd be able to do that. You could say they're down on their luck and I'm checking that box off, or they are spiritually disabled and, you know, or mentally ill. There's a lot of mental illnesses that a lot of people have a touch of bipolar. I don't think I have any. I've never thought I have had any. I'm diagnosed with them. So, privatization, that's something we're going down the wrong road with. And it's almost like, as the show earlier was the show about our new police unions, it's almost like now these people are privatized and they're not working for the government anymore. They're working for an entity, like an oligarchy entity, and we don't have control anymore. Well, we got to be careful of that with social services too. We need to bring in the reins a little bit and slow this the horses out of the barn, and these privatization schemes have been running wild for a long time. So, the private public service company is the devil's most perfect tool, and we're overpaying, and you own the company. It's a handy tool to have in your oligarchy quest to eliminate the activist. That's one job of the oligarchy, because the oligarchy people and the activist person doing God's work or doing good works, like I'm doing what my dad did, just a good volunteer. And I came into this system knowing what I was doing too. I didn't know I was going to take so long to put the town nurse-based system on the table. I thought it was like 3 years. I'll do this deal in 3 years with this town nurse-based system, but I didn't have that going in. It took me many years to come up with it. I thought it would be like 3 years, that I'd be moving on, going to fishing or boat building or truck driving or one of the many things I've done in my life. But in my lifetime, before I went in, before they threw me in Taunton State Hospital, and believe me, there were a couple articles in the newspaper saying I was crazy. This is by the Inquirer and Mirror. I mean, huge headlines, which hurt quite a bit. And I wasn't crazy. They had it out for me. The Inky Mirror had it out for me with that issue. And I think the rich people were trying to kind of take over on Nantucket. That's oligarchy. And they really are undermining the process, the due process, and the old-fashioned democracy. All that process is being undermined now with this new wave of evil. This oligarchy is basically evil, taking over our democracy in many different forms. Privatization of the clubhouse is just one of those things. So I think we need either state-run clubhouses, state-town, like they do in Hawaii. Now, all these clubhouses in the world are not run the same way. There's about 300 or 400 clubhouses in the world, including China and Japan and Australia and Africa now. So this is a phenomenon that started, as I've mentioned, in 1947 in New York City. It was designed by mentally ill people. It really does work. It really is the thing to do with your disabled people. And I'm not just talking mentally ill. Yeah, greed Greed is really a wedge that's driving us apart. Greed is the wedge now. And with these privatization schemes, to have agencies running your clubhouses, rather than local control, local 501c3, there's no $100 million company, as I've said earlier. We're holding up, poor and disabled people are holding up an immense load of pencil pushers and bureaucrats. And, if you need to take someone shopping and a little bit of oversight and friendship and someone's disabled, that doesn't require an $80,000 a year Mercedes-Benz driving social worker. We don't need them. We need a volunteer working with the church that comes into the clubhouse on a regular basis. We have a real champion down there at the Cove Club in Bay Bridge. She's been doing it. Team Izzy. Now, if you're going to the Pilgrim Church in Howardsport, you know about Team Izzy doing social work. Well, we need more of that. And I found over the years, and I was on the board of Friends of Bay Bridge, and they gave me a little plaque. I dedicated myself, and I used to dedicate myself quite a bit to all kinds of work in the clubhouse. I would drive the van, and quite often I'd be the only one on a trip years ago with a van load of us, and we'd go out to we'd go to Boston or go on a trip somewhere. No staff. See, that's the beauty of a clubhouse, is that you may not really know, if you walk into a clubhouse, who the staff are. It's not like they're wearing uniforms. And you can have staff that aren't too tightly wrapped, but they're doing a good enough job, You don't have to be qualified to a great level to be a really good clubhouse staff. And there's all kinds of niches to fill. So we want to get back to the basics here. I think we used to have almshouses and poorhouses, and some of those were used to institutionalize people, let's say. And that was local, but they were mandated by the state too. So get back to basics. And another thing is pay-as-we-go government. That can be one of those things where if you're working at a certain level in the government, police, fire, clubhouses, we should be able to pay you as we go. And that should be the end of the deal. And if pay-as-you-go means contributing to your retirement account, so much the better. Yes, definitely. Or if it means just regular Social Security, too, that might be good, too. So, years ago, I advocated something called Clubhouse Works Agency. That would be an agency dedicated to the cause of bringing clubhouses to the freestanding with the deed. And we lost a good director, Heather Lowe, because we went for the freestanding with the deed, and she lost her job over that, and I swear it's true. Cross my heart and hope to die. These oligarchy people and the privatization people got rid of the best, by far, clubhouse director in the world. She was that good. Heather Lowe. Bay Bridge clubhouse director. The best. She mentored me. That's how I learned about clubhouse. I learned under the best. Under the very best. Unbelievable. She was the type of director that the clubhouse would open at 8, she'd be there at 7:30, but there'd be a line of 15 people there at 7:30. And we'd all go in, get the clubhouse running, and the rest of the staff would come in at 8, and we'd have the show pretty much. Breakfast would be going and everything would be going. Staff would walk in. She'd be in her office. If there was some crisis, she'd be dealing with it first thing in the morning. And, it's just a gift. I don't think she was a physicist or a mathematician. She was just a regular person, but she had the gift. Now that's what you want. And she came up from the ranks too. So anyway, you want the best gifted people. You don't want these political hacks. I guess that's my point. Running, running a clubhouse because, because they're a hatchet man or a hatchet woman. You know what I mean? Because they'll do the dirty work of the Wicked Witch of the West, let's say. You don't want people like that. You really do just want the best people who want to do God's work. That's what you want. You're not going to get that unless you get rid of these agencies. You get a lot of saints in there now who have tolerated for many, many years kind of the evil in the agency. They have to tolerate it. And I have admiration for them, and I also have admiration for the people that had to leave because they couldn't take it and they couldn't do it. I've hung in there. Believe me, I've wanted to leave this whole scene. But not until I get the job done. When you say you pray and you talk to God about, doing something, well, I did that pretty heavy duty. And I came into this system knowing, because I'd conquered fishery management. I was already published when they picked me up and threw me in Taunton State Hospital. I was published. IFET 2000, that is International Institute of Fisheries Economics and Trade, IIFET. That's IFET 2000. It's on my webpage for the environmentalfisherman.com. And there's some old stuff there about my energy system, which is called Green Grid Transit now. Back then I was calling it the TRIPE system. But I don't mind changing the name. Green Grid T is actually the better name. It's the T. Call it the T. I got to go catch the T. Well, if the T is a green grid, so much the better. If it carries your hydrogen, your compressed air that runs your heating and air conditioning, and your oxygen-rich compressed air that is capable of many different things. But they say, the hydrogen economy. There's all this these bundled utilities is really awesome. And I had time to work on all that stuff because I was a good club member, but I also was a hard worker. I was always a hard worker, and you can ask anyone on Nantucket too. I was always a hard worker. If you ever hired me, then you hired a hard worker, honest, hard-working. Privatization with the buses, too. That has gone south. And I can testify that as soon as the Teamsters took over from privately managed, strictly privately managed with no union, I used to drive for the Cape Cod Regional Transit Authority. And I did that for a few months in Provincetown and Truro. And when the union came in, they had to get rid of me, so they accused me of stealing dollar bills. And actually, just the opposite was true. I had a little slush fund, and I would help people out if they didn't have a dollar, the disabled people. I didn't get abused. But you had to make change back then. It wasn't like exact change. You had to stop the bus, and if they had a 10, you had to make change. This was in the infancy of Cape Cod Regional Transit Authority up there in P-Town. So they were just working out policy, and I had done a lot of this on Nantucket for the Nantucket Regional Transit Authority. And I had a transportation reports. I think it ended up being about 26 pages long. But the buses and the taxis together, I had designed them to interface together. So that's the way to go in the future, to have something like Uber. And I designed, as I say, I invented Uber because I invented something I called Total Information Transfer System. And then coupled with that, it was closest available taxi, CAT, system. And those two would pair up together. And so I had it designed many years ago that if you had a card and you swiped the card as you got on the bus, and bear in mind this is like 20 years ago I designed this system, that it would know who you were because your card would identify you, and then you'd push the home button. So if you were getting out, if you're going from town to your house in Tom Nevers, the bus would let you off at Tom Nevers Road, and then your taxi would be waiting for you there, and it would take you on a subsidized ride home. You'd have to pay the taxi, but it would be subsidized public transportation. And then, so the taxis would be making money from the public transportation. And it's ideal for the Cape, this system, simply because hardly anybody lives on the line, you know, within walking distance. It's not like Boston where everything's close by to the, well, actually it's not, but a lot of people live close enough to the T, to use the T, the transit system, the subways. I love designing things, and this dovetail track for the green grid transit system, it morphs into a subway. So you've got to have something that works for the subway systems of all the cities of the world, and this does. This green grid T works for all the subway systems of the world. We're going to replace all the train systems, rural, city. It's all going to be one standard, a 7-foot dovetail track. I could be wrong about that. It could be a 9-foot dovetail track. I would go 9 foot, but you see, if you're designing for 200 years out into the future, you've got a pretty special task. You've got to have vision. So my dad used to say, these people have no vision. And it would be like, okay, Dad, you know, you had your article for the a couple of properties on the point at Saquatucket Harbor. And the people turned it down, as I mentioned on the last show or the show before that. And Dad had to suffer with these people with no vision. I realized people have no vision. Dad realized it, but the difference between me and Dad is I'm not a bit surprised. You know, no vision, and you can add no to a lot of things too. Gumption, I suppose. People of today don't have the gumption that we used to have as a population many, many years ago. But beware the privatization, and I've given 2 examples of the Cape Cod Regional Transit Authority. Now, what we need for that is a driver pool of bus drivers and taxi drivers who both work for a public transit system that is dovetailing of the buses and the taxis together. So the bus feeds the taxi and the taxi feeds the bus. I could walk you right through this. I've accomplished this before they threw me in Taunton, and I was like, can't you guys look at my work? You know, no, they didn't want to do that. They were pretty much hell-bent on killing me when I was getting put into Taunton. I got out by the grace of God. I got out. Massachusetts is evil. It really is wicked and evil in the way we've turned here, and we need to straighten out. And we can do that, but our Republican Party here in Massachusetts has to get some help from Nebraska, as I see it. And if I can stimulate that with the codfish apology, that might work. So privatization, especially in fisheries, it's a nightmare, but I've been all through that, giving these deeded rights away to a few people. It's just terrible. Privatization in the clubhouse world, privatization with the buses. We could go on. That's just 3 examples. We need to do it ourselves. These government systems need to stand on their own. Okay, folks, that's the Scannell Agenda. Happy New Year, and God bless you.